Hey everybody, welcome to Fistful of Cards, your best friend LPF, and today, it's been a while. We're going to talk a little bit today about a brand new kind of show that we've got going on here. It's called Point Blank, as you can see by the lovely Point Blank next to me, right over here. And it's basically going to be a rambling show where it's going to be more of a podcast audio vlog, I guess, about Doomtown Reloaded, largely because there just isn't a whole lot of Doomtown kind of strategy content out there being made. And so we figured we would make some. And so this is that. It's going to be sort of a deep dive into deck building and Doomtown strategy and things of that nature. Uh, but mostly it will be me rambling. So maybe it's not a new show at all. Uh, but today's episode is going to be having a plan. Good. Uh, Having a plan in Doomtown and what that means and what that looks like and why that's important and kind of where we have sort of strayed from that. And so I guess I want to start off by talking a little bit about uh, how different card games approach their win conditions versus how Doomtown does. And so let's talk a little bit about Magic the Gathering. In Magic the Gathering, the turns of the game are super structured. You have different phases, and your actions within those phases are really specific. And because of that, they are able to streamline the way that the mechanics of the game communicate with players how they're supposed to win. Because like 99% of Magic decks win through combat of some kind or damage of some kind, with the goal ultimately being to kill your opponent. And by creating a phase where it's like this is the phase where you kill your opponent, you force players into situations where it's really easy to identify that that's important, and it's also really easy to identify that you need to do something about this, right? Doomtown doesn't really have as much structure as most card games. It actually, ironically, does not have a whole lot of structure, despite being a game with structures. Um, it has uh, it has one big phase that's very loose, and you create smaller phases, shootouts and stuff like that, and movement, which is good. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it does result in a lot of players kind of getting blown away by the amount of options at their disposal, and so they end up hyper focusing on um, things that are not the victory condition. And so the victory of condition of Doomtown is there's only one, and it's you win by having more control points than your opponent has influence, and uh, that tends to throw people off. Because the game thematically is so poker driven, it's so shootout driven, and that's what a lot of people really like about the game. But at the end of the day, it's this like side, that is a path to victory that is not directly linked to victory. Because I could kill all of your dudes on the first turn, but if I don't have any control points, I still can't win. Um, and so we'll be talking about sort of how to avoid those situations, why those situations are not good, why deck building, why you can kind of put yourself into a losing position the moment you build your deck, and how to think about cards and how to add cards into your deck that allow you to be more proactive. And that's kind of just the focus on this is having a plan means being proactive and choosing cards in your deck that allow you to push the win condition, which is having more control points than your opponent has influence, while not sacrificing too much of your secondary and tertiary plans, which is kind of like how am I going to go about doing this in addition to just putting deeds on the table. And so I think a big place to start with this is that we as a community tend to uh, because deck building in Doomtown is so daunting, players will say things like, I don't know what to do. Like, it's super confusing. The math on it is like crazy. What should I do? And people tend to say, hey, just don't worry about it. Run like 16, 16, 16 for a while. You'll get the hang of it, and then you'll be solid, right? And so a lot of players end up in the situation where they're like they're trained very early on to care pretty much only about poker. They are told over and over again, structure, care about the structure, and structure is extremely important in Doomtown, like especially if you're getting into any sort of shootout. But the the path that people tend to take results in people ending up in scenarios where they actually take more and more win conditions out of their deck and replace them with more shootout actions. And so what I see from a lot of players is there's a lot of like, okay, well, if I'm running like 16, 16, 15, I can have like 12 deeds in my deck, right? Or, I could have pretty much 12 deeds in my deck. And well, I'm going to go down to 9. Well, I'm going to go down to 8. Well, I'm going to go down to 6. And they're all going to be out of town with no control points. And that can result in a lot of problems because just mathematically speaking, right? Just like pure raw math, not even strategy. If I have 10 deeds in my deck and if I have any amount of deeds in my deck, but I have 10 deeds in my deck that all have control points, if my opponent starts with the baseline minimum influence for starting posses in this day and age of Doomtown Reloaded, which we'll have another video about starting posses, but if they start with a minimum, which is 4, right? That's the baseline minimum. Pretty much anyone will tell you that. That's not really a contestable point. You have to play half the deeds in your deck to beat what they start with, right? So if you don't have ways of generating more control points, generating more pressure by having call out actions or jobs or things like that, if you don't have ways of accelerating that process, you have to play half the deeds in your entire deck in order to beat what they start with. And God forbid they're like turn 1, play a dude, put a hat on him. Then you're just so far behind it's out of control. And 4 isn't even common. Like there's some factions that kind of struggle with starting posses still and tend to have like somewhere in the like 4 range. But there's factions like dogs that can start like 6 and entrepreneurs that can start like 6 or 7 depending on what kind of deck you're playing. And you just end up in the scenario where you are so far behind. And then, under those same things, it's like you have to play 8 of your 10 deeds to beat their starting posse. You have to play 7 of your deeds to defeat their starting posse. And so it becomes very obvious why you need to include proactive ways of dealing with things. And for some factions, this is a lot easier than other factions. For some archetypes, this is a lot easier than others. And so we're going to talk a little bit about like what factions and what archetypes do it really, really well and how they do it and kind of how you can do it with every faction and how you can kind of create flocks for your opponent, create win conditions for yourself, things like that. So to start off, like talking about Sloan Gang, right? Sloan Gang is probably the best example of creating clocks in Doomtown. Sloan Gang meaning the home, but also the faction. Outlaws as a faction has a bunch of homes that create control points. That's just like a thing that they like to do. And a lot of them give you direction, like Desolation Row, make wanted dudes get control points, right? You've got a plan. The job lets you get bounty. Other actions allow you to get bounty and things like that. And so it's very, very focused. And that is good. But Sloan Gang specifically is a perfect example for what I'm talking about, because it's not what I'm not saying, or what I am saying is not that poker decks are bad. It's not a case of like, oh, shootout decks are bad, you should play slide every game. It's more that focusing everything in your deck on poker structure tends to make it so that even though you're really, really good at this one aspect of the game, you are not good at the aspect of the game that actually wins the game. And so you become very, very reliant on your opponent getting into fights with you And decks that want to get into fights tend to not make it so that it's good to play poker against them. If you think about decks like Abominations, like Blessed, like Mad Scientists, um, those decks tend to win through attrition. They tend to win through huge amounts of hand rank manipulation, huge amounts of casualty reduction, huge amounts of recursion. And so, like, you can play, the Blessed players, like, sure, yeah, man, I've had 3 turns of setting up, got all my blessings, got all my miracles, I should say, and they wander into town, and you're like, finally, let's fight. And they're like, sure, let's play poker. We're going to play just honest, straight poker. But as a reminder, I have 7 casualty reduction, so you're just going to have to win like 8 hands in a row before I actually take casualty. And I'm just going to have to win 1 during any of that. So good luck to us both, I guess. And so I think that that's just kind of an important piece to keep in mind, is that there's a lot of poker decks that exist out there, but they supplement that poker with like extremely powerful effects that basically nullify the poker aspect entirely. And so there's these 2 sides um, of this equation of like being strong against poker decks, and it's like, one, I just don't interact with the mechanic at all. I'm a slide deck, I'm a 4th ring control deck, and the other is I interact with it. I still fight you, but I fight you in such a way that the fight is almost irrelevant, because I'm my deck is entirely tokens or recurring abominations, or all these other things, and I can soak so much more than you. I can handle so much more than you if you're just playing like honest poker with like bullet modifiers. Um, and so, how do I make bullet modifiers matter? Going back to Sloan. Sloan Gang generates a huge amount of control points. You play Alley, you play the Sloan Gang home, and you're generating 2 a turn plus deeds, right? And so all of a sudden you end up in the situation where you are creating a clock for your opponent, and you're saying, if you do not come out and fight me, I will just win. And so that is what is the mentality that you need to be thinking about for every deck that you build in the game. And the reason is because when you create a clock for your opponent, you inevitably put them in a position where they have to come out and play. They have to come out and interact with you, because if they don't, they just lose. But if you don't have those elements in your deck, then you don't get those opportunities, and then they will come out and fight you on their own terms, or they will just not fight you at all. And that can result in those games lasting for huge swaths of time. I played in the Tombstone event, and one of the inspirations for this video was actually a comment on my match with Doomdog, which you can watch on the Pinebox YouTube channel. And we both played in the finals, and one of the comments, the video is like 15 minutes long, and one of the comments was, I didn't even know you could play a match of Doomtown in 15 minutes, right? And it's because both of us are running extremely proactive decks. Both of us are running, I'm running Bounty Hunter Law Dogs. He's running 4th ring Influence Control. And both of those decks are like, I've got deeds, I've got dudes, I've got cards that push the win condition by either, in influence manipulation removes influence, which is basically the same as creating control points. And Bounty Hunters forces you to get into fights. And so every faction has something that they can do, or some archetype that they can interact with that is proactive in some way. It's just a matter of looking at those cards and looking for those cards that'll allow you to sort of push your deck in a direction where you're able to dictate the flow of how a match goes a lot more cleanly. Like I said, Law Dogs has Bounty Hunters. They have cards like the Judge. They have cards like Clyde. And you don't have to run like a Judge deck. You can just include the Judge in your deck, because what it does is it creates power plays. It creates tempo swings for you. You say, well, it's turn 3 and you haven't really done anything, and I haven't really done anything, but guess what? My hand has a Judge in it, so here's the clock. I'm going to kill a guy every single turn until the game's over, unless you do something about it, right? And so you create pressure points for your opponent to have to deal with, and that's extremely important in any card game, and Doomtown's no exception. But what if you were playing, because like, going through the list just like super quickly, you've got horses, has run them down, call out card, bounty hunter, out of law dogs, call out card, judge, things like that. You have Sloan Gang for outlaws, you have protection racket for outlaws, you have Desolation Row for outlaws, all produce control points. A lot of their dudes create control points. Allie Hensman creates control points, etc. But then you start to go into, influence reduction out of fourth ring. I don't know if I already said that. But then you start to wane a bit. Then we start to end up in factions like Eagle Wardens, where there's not as many opportunities to create control points. They've got 7 Eagles, or is that his name? Don't know. But he's kind of high risk, low reward. You've got anarchists can run Blessed. Blessed recently got a huge buff to their ability to be proactive with Sentinel, which is Pine Box card. Not recently, but within the past, couple of years. Sentinel generates control points. Perfect. Allows you to proactively create clocks for your opponent. Good stuff. Good stuff. But anarchists, Kung Fu, maybe not as many opportunities, and so it's like, how do I create these opportunities? What cards do I look for? Eagle Wardens kind of have multiple homes that are sitting around homes, that's sitting around deck. Both the Eagle Wardens core and Spiritual Society, and I like Spiritual Society as a home, but it's not proactive. It doesn't generate you control points the same way the Sloan Gang does. It just kind of has you sit in town square. And there's some proactivity to that, you're controlling that aspect of the board and that kind of thing. But, it's just about creating more of a tempo swing. You want more out of your deck than like, well, when you show up, I'm going to kick the shit out of you. It's more like, I'm now winning the game because I'm producing control points. So some things to think about, right? It doesn't have to be the case that you throw kidnapping into every deck, but kidnapping is an option. It's a neutral option, right? But what are some other options, right? Maybe you don't cut as much into your deeds. Maybe you just run more deeds. Maybe you run 14 deeds. It doesn't have to be the sense where, like, there was a time period when a lot of people were kind of bumping their deeds a little bit, and it was kind of funny because everybody was calling every deck a slide deck. Any deck that had like 12 deeds or more was a slide deck, but it was like, oh, this is a 3 structure deck that has 14 deeds. And it was like, oh, it's shooty slide. And it's like, shooty slide. I don't know. It just was funny to me because it's like, no, slide is like a thing because it's this specific archetype. You can't just be like, oh, you're a slide deck, but you can shoot really well and play poker or have forced callouts. It's like, at some point, you're a different deck. But yeah, you could just include more deeds, more control points. Obviously, you could do that. You could include different dudes from other factions or neutral dudes like Nicodemus. Perfect example of a dude. He's not as strong as he once was, but he still can produce 3 control points. And sometimes that's just enough. I've never played a game and dropped Nicodemus, and people have been like, that doesn't matter at all. You put Nicodemus on the table, and it immediately changes the flow. There's different expectations. He's a big power swing in your favor because he's basically worth 3 deeds, as long as you've got the support for him. Allie Hensman. Allie Hensman can go into every deck, and in all honesty, probably should. Like, if you're playing an Eagle Warden Spiritual Society deck and you're not super worried about any sort of like pulls, throw Allie Hensman in. If not 2. Like, she just wins the game if you let her sit around for long enough. And so these are the things to be looking for, as we move forward with the game, as people kind of get better and better and better at Doomtown Reloaded, is ways of winning the game on your own term, creating opportunities for victory, creating opportunities for you to be in control of the board, for you to say to your opponent, you have to come fight me, you have to come up with a solution to my problem, or you have to just accept the fact that I might just like win this game by putting more control points on the table. And if you're a new player, this is also extremely important to you. Doomtown structure is fascinating. like the structure of deck building is very fascinating. And the reason it's fascinating isn't just because poker is cool. It's because doomtown structure building is about risk management. It's like, how many cards can I afford to it's less, in my opinion, it's less about what's the strongest poker deck I can make, and it's how how much of a how weak of a poker deck can I make and still be relevant? How weak of a poker deck can I make and still maybe win a shootout? We've made lists on this channel that are like 14, 14, 10 and stuff like that, and they still do well. I've had people say, hey, took a deck of yours to the tournament, and I won, or I did really well. And it's because you cut into structure to create opportunities to win, not the other way around. And if there's nothing else you take from this video, that's the thing, right? Is that you don't want to end up in a position where you're taking away win opportunities, you're taking away win conditions, you're taking away power plays and replacing them with structure, or replacing them with like basic shootout actions, things like that. What you want to be doing is you want to be taking away structure and taking away and focusing on the risk management of your deck in order to create opportunities for you to win. You create opportunities for you to push the envelope, because even if you're running a deck that can just deny shootouts, you still need a way to get someone to fight you if they don't want to. If I'm running a blessed deck, I should include Sentinels. I should include Ali. I should include Nicodemus. I should figure out a way to force my opponent to come fight into my 7 casualty reduction cards. That's the key, is that players don't have to play with you. They don't have to interact with you in a way that you want them to, because oftentimes the answer to, well, my opponent's currently winning and is controlling town square, but they're not checking me, is I will sit in my home and we will see if I can draw some cards in the next few turns that will turn the tide for me. And that can result in very long games, very drawn out games. And you want to be able to take opportunity of your board presence. You want to be able to take opportunity and proactively in the game. And I think that's where we're going to end it today. I'm at 22 minutes. That's a little long, and I did ramble a bit. But hopefully this video was enjoyable for somebody. If you like the new stuff, give us a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Either way, we want to hear from you, what you thought about the new format, the new show, any of that kind of stuff. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.